Have you missed it? Like, do you guys think, oh, I should have got in on Bitcoin?
I don't spend a lot
5 years ago.
Bitcoin.
And Bitcoin is something that certainly a lot of people think, is going to rise as an alternative currency.
The Australian Bitcoin Podcast, presented by Heartblock.
It's not a currency, it's not money. I don't understand it.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the Australian Bitcoin Podcast, episode 97. I'm DJ. G'day, Mike. How's it going, mate?
Good, mate. How you going?
Very good, very good. Everything is as it should be. Everything is perfect. Let's be honest. It's pretty good. We've got a new all-time high to acknowledge. I don't necessarily know celebrate is the right word, but we'll talk about price in a minute. Recording this on the 9th of October. We are currently at block height 918,245. Price of Bitcoin currently in US cuck bucks is $123,000 approximately, which equates to around about 187,000 Australian dollar dues. So we're kissing 190,000. We hit an all-time high a couple of days ago. I think in USD it was 126,296, which roughly equates to about 195,000 Australian dollar dues. So if you're a term deposit holder, I dare say you're probably in disbelief. And I got a little bit of saltiness from Mr. Alan Kohler last night on one of the TVs. There's a clip going around on the internet. I don't watch the mainstream news, of course. I just don't have that much time in my day. But yeah, he was slightly salty in the fact that you can't hold a Bitcoin. What do you reckon?
Yeah, he was riffing on the gold price and then gave a shout out to the Bitcoin price, and he just can't work out why that price keeps going up. You can't touch it, you can't weigh it. So why does that number keep going up? You just can't work it out. But yeah. Alan, how much does the number in your Aussie dollar bank account weigh? So it's a bit of silly logic there, but appreciate the shout out nonetheless.
We do. And look, even if he was to pull that requisite amount of cash out into the bank, $195,000. I mean, imagine the questions that he would be asked just to even go and try and withdraw that. They probably wouldn't even have that in the bank. Interesting point about Mr. Alan Kohler. I think he gets it, but I think perhaps it's kind of like the Upton Sinclair syndrome, where it's, you can't expect a man to understand a problem for which he gets paid to not understand it. That's butchered, that quote, but effectively that's what it is. Because he wrote an opinion piece, I guess, an op-ed in newdaily.com.au at the start of 2024, I think it was around March 2024. And in that, he actually calls it one of the most tightly controlled... let me see if I can find this. He gives a list of basically reasons why the Bitcoin system is inherently regulated, not by any governments or central banks, but only by an inbuilt design that can't be changed. And then he goes through the list, the difficulty of generating a block, that the reward gets halved every 210,000 blocks, and there's a cap of 21 million Bitcoins. So he comes to this conclusion and he says, this, I submit, makes Bitcoins the most... And he calls them Bitcoins, which that's a whole nother debate for another day. But he says, this, I submit, makes Bitcoins the most tightly controlled financial asset known to man. It continually becomes scarcer until a preset limit is reached. His final paragraph in that, you pointed this out in the chat earlier this morning. So Bitcoin might look like a Ponzi bubble because its price is volatile and it seems to be in the grip of speculators and scam artists. But in fact, it may be the only thing that isn't one. So I got my suspicions about Mr. Kohler. I think he gets it. I think his son gets it too. He sort of posts some nice cheeky, Instagram, TikTok reels about, I guess, the current state of the Australian economy, which at the very least humorous. You can't hold a Bitcoin, Mr. Kohler, but you can hold an open dime, and if you want, we can send you one. There'll be no sats on it, though. I'm not going to waste sats.
Oh, we'll kick him some. We'll kick him some because I think deep down you're right. I think he does get it, but he is the front man for the traditional financial system, traditional economics, and so I think he kind of knows, and it does come through in that article, even though it's framed as an attack. When you read it, it's actually incredibly bullish for Bitcoin. It's like he says, it's the most tightly controlled monetary asset in the world. And it's yeah. I mean, that's in many ways that's a very good thing because it means that it can't get co-opted, it can't get changed, can't get printed, all these sorts of things that plague everything else. And so that's why he's kind of giving you a wink in that final little paragraph where he says it may in fact be the only asset that's free from Ponzi's and speculators and all of that sort of thing. So
yeah. I mean,
I think he's all right. He's all right.
I think he's okay. I think he gets it. One interesting point too, as we open the show, is we've been holding steady over a Zeta hash for quite some time. Certainly the last 2 episodes that we recorded, the first one with Daz, lest we forget with the internet troubles we had there. But basically, that's 6 trillion hashes per second. So current hash rate on the network is 1,139 exahash per second, which is like mind-bogglingly. I don't know what that means. It's provocative. But the point is that, so those kind of numbers doing those one second at a time is just kind of nuts, really. So let's get into the price discussion. Why don't you? I've talked way too much so far in this pod. Why don't you give us a quick rundown of what happened with the price?
Yeah, so price has been going all right. We've had a 10% bump in the last month. Over the last year, it's gone up 100%. So pretty decent gains when you zoom out a little bit. So we came off an all-time high on October 7th, so 2 days ago from when we're recording. Hit that all-time high of 190k Aussie dollars, 126k US dollars. We've come down a little bit since then. We're at 187k now at time of recording, so a couple of days later. So we're not that far off that 200k high watermark for in Aussie dollars. So, we could see it fairly soon, depending on what happens. But yeah, price is looking good. See how long it holds out. It does look like we are decoupling slightly from previous cycles where, you'd see these bull runs last for about a year post-halving. Now, the halving, if I remember correctly, maybe look it up while I'm talking, it's April 2024, April 2024, I think was the last halving. So we're well over that year gap since the halving, but we still seem to be in this bull territory. So we may be seeing this sort of decoupling from the traditional cycles playing out right now. But obviously anything can happen, so stay frosty out there. The other thing that's kind of ripping at the moment that I'm sure a lot of listeners are quite aware of is gold. Gold's also having its rip. It's just crested $4,000 an ounce, US dollars an ounce, for the first time just now. So that's a big milestone, and it's been ripping. Just a year ago, gold was 2.6K. 2,600 US.
Oh, really?
Just a year ago. And almost doubled. And if you look back in history, when the gold price has doubled, that's when crazy stuff has been happening. So, if this trend continues, and it's likely off the back of the government shutdown in the US. So if anyone's not aware, the US government has been shut down for 7 days now. And that can be triggering a lot of investors to do their, flight to safety in things like gold, their traditional safe haven. And so, the longer the government's shut down, the longer the price could rip in gold. More people flee to safety, and crazy stuff will start happening. Because, if you look back in history and you look at that for that gold price doubling, crazy stuff has happened. So we could be in for a wild one.
It is pretty nuts. I mean, you recall to mind the Weimar chart where I think it's the mark basically is just this super dynamic thing going all the way up and to the right as it debases against the gold price. And that's a chart that I think is fairly stark. What's interesting is, for I guess Bitcoiners that have done the work, they'll kind of look at that chart and go, good grief, that's insane. Unfortunately, I've used that on a couple of people to try and demonstrate, even say uncles that work in that kind of world, and they just look at it like, what? I don't understand that chart. And he's like, well, that could happen again. That could happen quite quickly, and we're kind of seeing that. I didn't realize that the gold price had actually doubled in that time, and if you denominate it in Australian dollars, that's over $6,000 for a little ounce of gold. So I wonder, did the same arguments hold up where you'll advocate for buying Bitcoin for someone and they'll tell you that, I can't afford it. I can't afford a whole Bitcoin. And usually the counter is like, well, yeah, I mean, I can't afford like a whole Apple stock. I can't afford a whole Google company or an Apple company, but I can buy a share. Exactly. You probably can't even afford a whole ounce of gold now, to be honest. So then what? What are you buying? Where are you putting your money? I don't know. It's an intellectual stretch, perhaps. I get it, but $6,000 for a little ounce of gold it's pretty crazy.
The other interesting gold thing to come off the back of this is that I wasn't aware of is gold is now set to become Australia's second most valuable commodity export off the back of the price run of gold. Of
course,
so it's in the process as we speak. It's taking over LNG, liquefied natural gas, so Australia, we're raking it in from digging up stuff and selling it. Who'd have thought it? We're riding this high off of the gold price. Obviously, Australia as a whole, it's questionable whether the average Aussie benefits from us digging up and selling it. It's obviously enriching just a very small amount of Australians. But yeah, that was surprising to me. It's our second most valuable commodity export now.
Second most valuable commodity export, so long as that gold isn't laced or riddled with tungsten. If you recall, a couple of years ago, there was a scandal from the Perth Mint where basically they allegedly doped 1 kilo bars with extra silver, copper to cut costs, which kind of, sort of devalued.
I missed that one. You typically hear those stories coming out of like China and stuff. You often hear that sort of thing where they have fake bars and that sort of thing. I completely missed that one. So that was Perth Mint out of Australia was doing that.
Well, that was a rumor. So I've just pinged this into our good friend Grok because search results nowadays are completely useless and hopeless. However, there was basically some kilo bars that were discovered to have tungsten in the in the gold, but that was apparently
sold diluted gold to China, got caught, and tried to cover it up. Yeah,
there you go.
Looks like it did happen.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting. At least with Bitcoin, if we go back to our mate Alan Kohler and any of his kind of echo chamber, is that you can run a node and you can verify yourself that you might not be able to hold the Bitcoin per se, tangibly, but you can certainly verify that you actually have it, as opposed to the gold, where you might be able to hold the gold, but can you tell legitimately by weight, by holding it, whether or not it is actually a kilo bar, or is it laced or doped with sprinkling of tungsten?
So I'm still not convinced on the whole gold thing. It's still just even if you do have the legitimate gold, it's just such a pain. Like if you actually want to execute a trade and buy stuff with gold, you're going to bust out your cheese grater and grate off a little shavings of gold to buy your meat and your eggs from the farmer's market. It's happening a little bit in South America, but the better alternative exists in Bitcoin. So why even bother? Just go straight to the best thing and just start using that.
You've also got on the list there, mate.
Talk about BlackRock?
Well, no, just on the gold thing. You've got Australia's one of the leading gold producers with output projected to rise from 340 tons. So the interesting thing about that is obviously when the price rips, there's a greater incentive to go in and mine more, which basically creates a little bit more stock on the market, which then effectively has a dilutive effect on the price, as opposed to Bitcoin, where you can turn on more miners, but the difficulty adjustment will square that away within the sort of the fortnight to come, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all.
Yep.
And
Saudi Arabia's just found a whole bunch of gold. There's a Queensland company that is reporting that they might have found a new source of gold in Queensland as well. So there's new sources popping up all the time. So that can't happen with Bitcoin. So again, Bitcoin wins.
It does. It is. Bitcoin is money. Gold is an excellent industrial metal that we can use for many cool things, but buying and selling things down at the market is just not one of them, particularly not in the 21st century. So that kind of, if you want to hold some gold, fill your boots, but it looks pretty and it is kind of cool to hold. Like it is quite an extraordinary metal. If you've ever held some, I was lucky enough to do that a couple of years ago. It feels cool, but it's useless. It's a dumb rock. Speaking of dumb rocks, or maybe not so much dumb rocks, Larry Fink is probably not the dumbest person in the room. He's pretty smart. He finally got Bitcoin. If Bitcoin is an IQ test and you and I had, quote unquote, discovered Bitcoin before Mr. Larry Fink, perhaps we are a little bit further to the right on that bell curve than he is. But let's get to the point. BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF nears $100 billion and becomes the firm's most profitable fund. It's the most popular, most profitable ETF launch in history. And there was so much dragging of the chain to get it across the line. And in just 21 months, it is, it's reached 100 billion in assets under management, which is absolutely extraordinary. So give us the download on that.
Yeah, so it only launched 21 months ago, so it's still very new in the context of these sort of larger legacy financial vehicles that you can get into. And it's reached $100 billion in assets. It's the most profitable fund. It outranks products that have been in circulation for more than 2 decades. It's generating $244.5 million in annual revenue. These are all US dollars. So it's doing insanely well. And and again, we've talked about this ad nauseum. The institutions are here. They're all filling their bags now. It's not just a retail play anymore. There's a lot of corporate buying happening, and these guys are leading the charge from the ETF perspective. Obviously, strategy from Michael Saylor is leading the charge from the corporate treasury strategy perspective. But yeah, BlackRock well ahead with their IBIT Bitcoin ETF. And but it's painful to me because it's like when I see things like, they're generating $244.5 million of revenue every year off of the back of this ETF, and I don't really understand how it works. I've never bothered with ETFs, not since I discovered Bitcoin. But my thought is, well, if BlackRock is making $250 million in revenue off of this product, does that mean that if retail buyers that are choosing to buy this ETF, if they had instead just chosen to stack Bitcoin themselves, then really that $250 million could be extra Bitcoin in those retail holders' pockets if they bought the real thing, rather than just lining Larry Fink's pockets and BlackRock and these shady wankers that deep down we all hate and shouldn't be supporting. we're basically we're letting them skim off the top with their revenues instead of just buying the actual thing and holding it yourself. So it's kind of like it's bullish, but I also I hate it. I hate seeing this sort of headline.
Are you looking for a simple way to buy Bitcoin in Australia? Hardblock makes buying Bitcoin easy. As Australia's longest running Bitcoin exchange, our mission is to help Aussies simply and easily buy Bitcoin and take it into self-custody. There are no deposit or trading fees, just a clear 1.2% spread whenever you buy or sell, lol. That covers our operating costs, so you always know exactly what you're paying. Withdrawals at just $1.18 AUD or as low as 400 sats with AutoSend. No hidden charges, no surprises, just a fast, reliable, and easy way to stack sats with total transparency. Get started today at hardblock.com.au. Bitcoin made easy for Aussies.
Yeah, you love to hate it. I guess the thing is, and then the reasoning or the rationale goes is that a lot of these family offices and hedge funds and other institutional buyers couldn't necessarily, according to their charter or their fiduciary responsibility, access spot Bitcoin price. So this kind of gives them that way to go in there. And that's obviously one of the massive incentives for Saylor to do what he's been doing at MicroStrategy, or rather Strategy. So yeah, exactly. What's interesting is that when the price ripped back in, around March, February, when the ETFs were launched back in 2024, that was kind of interesting, like the 0 day to figure out, okay, so the ETFs are launched. How long is it going to take to actually see that reflected in the spot price? And I think it was like 2 or 3 days, which is curious. But then since then, we've been doing this whole sideways crabbing, consolidation type effect where, there's questions of silly buggers and all that sort of stuff going on. With the ETF being launched and obviously being one of the most popular, hitting almost 100 billion AUM, you've got other ETFs. One in particular stands out, Vanguard, who didn't initially establish a Bitcoin ETF, and I don't think they still have, actually, but the person that's involved, the new CEO, I think his name is Salim Ramji, he actually launched the IBIT ETF at BlackRock, and so clearly the new CEO has stepped down and kind of had to take an L. And it's entirely possible that Vanguard becomes another institutional player offering up an ETF. Because if you're a Vanguard account holder and you don't have access to this incredibly popular product, and the debasement trade that's all the rage at the moment, it's almost like Wall Street are finally figuring it out. Oh yeah, right. The dollar is completely losing its purchasing power. We should rotate into gold, obviously, and of course Bitcoin. So yeah, everyone eventually bends the knee, irrespective of how smart you think you are, how wealthy you are. It doesn't matter. It's
I do wonder, just one last thing, and then we can move on, is, we mentioned before when we were talking about the Bitcoin price and how we may be seeing this decoupling from the traditional cyclical nature, 1 year out from a halving, and then we enter a bit of a crab or even a bear 1 year out, and we're not seeing that currently. The difference between this cycle and other cycles is the amount of ETF and institutional buying that is happening is unprecedented compared to previous cycles. So it could be that this institutional buying, this ETF buying, this is what is decoupling us from the traditional cycles of these, post-halving bears and bulls. So, I guess the silver lining is, for people that are just buying and holding, is that these ETFs filling their bags are stabilizing the price and sort of decoupling that traditional boom-bust cycle. So, anything could happen, as I said before, but it is, a thought that does cross my mind.
So I read something that the S&P 500, I'm pretty sure, is up 10%. I don't know if that's year on year or year to date. I can't remember. But if gold has doubled in that year on year. Imagine holding the S&P, like that is and how much is the US dollar actually debased in that time? I think it's around the same price. We might have to look that up and verify, but notionally what I'm getting at is if you're an S&P maxi and you've missed out on the gains from gold and certainly the gains from Bitcoin, and perhaps you've got a financial manager that is offering you incredibly poor advice. If you're still running a 60-40 portfolio, you might want to.
I've got it
fire
here.
your asset manager.
So 1 year of S&P 500, it's up 17%. Over 5 years, it's up 100%. So the S&P 500 took 5 years what it took Bitcoin to do in one. Bitcoin's up 100% in 1 year. And gold's up about 70% in 1 year, just at a guesstimate. But not, we're approaching gold's up 53% in 1 year. But it is rapidly accumulating. So, gold and S&P over 5 years are very similar. S&P is up 98% in 5 years. Gold is up 110% in 5 years. So
interesting.
Gold's only just beating out the S&P.
But that's that kind of that effect that I've mentioned before. I think you're sitting on a train, you're in one of the back carriages, and something like COVID hit. There's a huge liquidity crunch, and you feel that shock as the train moves out of the station, but your carriage actually doesn't move yet. And it's those further along carriages close to the engine, like the S&P, the NASDAQ, all of that kind of stuff, that actually feel that jolt sooner than the gold or the Bitcoin. But eventually, once it rips and it'll just go completely past them. So there's kind of like that delay, if over that 5 year period, that kind of that tracks pretty well. And it's almost like people are starting to figure out by 2025, 5 years after, oh gosh, we need to get in onto some harder assets here instead of stuff that you can print out of thin air, A little bit more sobering news, but kind of good. I don't know. I don't know how to read this. Anyway, we'll read the headline. So Roman Storm files motion for acquittal on all counts. The headline's great. It's fantastic, which is excellent news. So Tornado Cash obviously is... I think it's a shitcoin mixer, not to be too disparaging, but I think it's basically Ethereum. Based on Ethereum. So Roman Storm was doing that. And basically the background here is that if they could stick some charges to someone like Roman Storm for running this mixer on a shitcoin, what would you call it? Gosh, Whirlpool. It's kind of like Whirlpool for Ethereum. Then that could then set a precedent and lead to all sorts of troubling rulings to come. So the notion that he's filed this motion for acquittal on all counts is incredibly positive. But unpack that story if you would.
Yeah, so for anyone who missed it, the Tornado Cash trial was going on over the last 6 months. Roman Storm was one of the developers there. So he was found guilty for operating a unlicensed money transmitting business and basically facilitating money laundering, terrorism financing, all this sort of stuff. Because people were using it to anonymize their transactions. That's what a coin mixing service does. So Tornado Cash was on Ethereum. You can put your Ethereum in. It mixes it around with thousands of other users Ethereum, and then it spits out the Ethereum into where it needs to go at the other end, which could or could not be the same person, so that you've effectively broken the chain of following a transaction, following a token as it moves through the network. And so you've basically made it anonymous. So he was found guilty for that. And that obviously sets some scary precedents around, you're holding the tool maker liable for what someone does with the tools, because he made the software. He didn't necessarily facilitate it and use it to actually fund terrorism himself or whatever he was alleged to have been funding. But the allegation was that he was providing a business that allowed other people to use that tool to fund terrorism or whatever the government is trying to make you afraid of today. The sensible argument is, well, if you're a car manufacturer and someone buys your car and then uses it to drive it through a busy shopping mall, are you liable for someone doing that?
Or shoes,
no, because you shoes, someone kicking you in the face. Are you liable for
Yeah,
someone kicking
stealing
someone
your
in the face
handbag.
with your
That
shoes?
handbag would not have been stolen if the shoes didn't exist because the runner couldn't run faster. This is a slippery
And the
slope.
other obvious one is weapons manufacturers. There's a million examples you can pull out, so it's just a bit silly.
More amnesty
But
bins
anyway,
required.
they pushed through and found him guilty nonetheless. Same thing then happened to the Samurai wallet guys who run Whirlpool, which is a mixing service on Bitcoin. They ended up just pleading guilty off the back of Roman Storm being found guilty. And so anyway, that's the precedent that's been set. It's not great. It's bad. Now, this motion for acquittal is based on, rather than making the argument of I'm not responsible for what someone does with my tools, the argument for acquittal they're going for now is the tool I've made is code, and code is speech, and therefore it's protected by the First Amendment. Now, they could have done this as part of their first defense with the trial that has already been wrapped up, but supposedly the judge was basically a bit of a wanker in that regard and not open to that argument, and was basically willing to, I guess, depending on your position, effectively violate the First Amendment in order to get that guilty verdict. And so they just didn't bother. They didn't use that argument. They just went with all the other arguments. And now on appeal with this acquittal motion, that's where they're going for the First Amendment claim that code is speech. Speech cannot be limited as per the American Constitution. So it's one to watch. We don't have any real details further than that at this point. We'll just have to see how it plays out. And so we'll probably report on it next recording, maybe the newsletter or something like that, and just keep an eye on it as it plays out.
Yeah, it's kind of like an extension of the crypto wars that occurred in the 1990s when certain elements of code or cryptography was considered or classified as munitions and therefore treated like weapons, which needed to have all sorts of licensing and regulation and so on and so forth. But effectively, the cypherpunks, which actually Adam Back had a massive role in that. Adam Back is one of the only, he obviously is the CEO of Blockstream, but he was cited in the white paper. And the notion is that they fought back with code of speech, and so it's protected under the First Amendment, which is pretty powerful. So yes, I know that there was some people reluctant to go necessarily to trial straight off the bat with something like that, but it's almost like the truth will out, and hopefully some sense and reasoning will return to the world.
And they probably
But
had
the
this
world's
in their
not
strategy right from the start, which was, we'll see what happens, but then we can pull out the big guns later if we need to. And as much as the US is this sort of great source of disruption in the world and all these foreign wars and color revolutions and everything done by the US, and as much as they can be a bit wankerish in general, you got to respect the fact that they stick to their guns around the Constitution, and it does let them do stuff like this, protect speech, protect the right to bear arms, all that sort of thing. I'm definitely jealous over here in little old Australia, where we don't have freedom of speech, we don't have human rights as enshrined in our laws as much as we would like them to be when compared to the US. So a little bit of jealousy coming through on my part, I must say.
Yeah, there is that interesting American HODL has this interesting thesis that because obviously we're derivative of the British colonies, but there's this sort of element, he talks about it in terms of free speech. So like Americans will say something, and whether it's in jest or humor, but it'll be far more direct, abrasive, and cutting in its delivery, as opposed to the British humor, which is kind of takes a bit of a sly roundabout way, and if there's any offense caused, you can easily get out by saying, I was just joking, mate, like take it easy, like relax. And obviously being a derivative of the British colonies, we've inherently inherited that, and I think there's some truth to that. I kind of like that framing, and you're right though, because we've got e-Karens running around telling us what we can and cannot say on the internet. We've got a whole bunch of ridiculous, draconian, tyrannical laws coming down the pipeline that, by the way, no one actually voted for at the recent election. Like, none of that was on the policy platform. Basically, none of the evil crap that they're carrying on about. And this is all in light of the fact that the Australian government is literally driving the costs of living crisis and inflation and all this stuff, because inflation is everywhere and always a monetary phenomenon. You cannot escape that. But recent data comes out, 1 in 5 workers in Australia is a government employee. And I think that accounts for both direct and indirect. So there's a lot of like contractors through things like the NDIS and so on and so forth. Even your local roads, like the lollipop sign person is usually like a private company, but it's clearly being contracted by some state institution to go out and do it. So it's a huge, like, honestly, I'm kind of jealous that I'm not smart enough to just get in on this grift, but I also don't have the patience and the wherewithal to stand on a road for like 8 hours a day in the sun holding up a lollipop.
You could become a councillor. That's you can still get your suck off the government teat, work from home. You don't have to stand in the street.
I know people that do exactly that. It's mind-boggling. But in this note you've got here, the total public sector wage bill in Australia has grown 8% over the last financial year to $232.1 billion, which includes $37.3 billion for federal government employees who earn, get this, an average annual salary of more than $100,000, which actually isn't that much, right? But for a non-productive, effectively tax-consuming role, that's quite a substantial amount of money.
Yes, relative to the output, it's scary. It's basically you're throwing money into a bottomless pit when it comes to government spending and government salary packages. And then it does get pretty disheartening when you look up some of the higher paid people, people that are getting paid $400,000 to be like the gender sexuality minister of whatever affairs that can't even define what a biological man or biological woman is, who walks away with a $400,000 pay packet. It's very disheartening, paid for by your taxes as well. Very disheartening stuff here in little old Australia.
Look, we could rail and carry on about the state of the government. We will just mention one last thing before we pivot, but we've got, talk about government waste and perhaps fraud's too big of a word, but the bailing out of certain industries, say the one in Mount Isa. So I'm just trying to find that on the list we've got here, but basically, there's a whole bunch of industries which are back against the wall and are looking for a bailout, essentially, because their business model is being disrupted.
Yes. So there's a lot of these stories popping up every now and then. It's worth reminding ourselves, even though we live in Bitcoin land, our taxes still go to this sort of thing. So it's worth keeping tabs on it. So the latest one is the Mount Isa copper smelter is getting a bailout of $600 million, taxpayer-funded bailout over 3 years to secure the jobs of 600 workers in 2 sites. So that works out to be about $300,000 per employee over the 3 years. Per year over the 3 years, paid for by a taxpayer bailout. And, I did a little bit of digging on this. So it's a Swiss mining company, Glencore. They do have a lot of operations here in Australia, but notably it's a Swiss company. It's not an Australian company. It's a Swiss company getting a Australian taxpayer funded bailout of $600 million. And then you can go and look at the ownership of Glencore, and it's there's a private investor that holds like 12% or something. But then after that, it's BlackRock, it's these investment management companies and stuff. So it's all the who's who of the companies that we know and love. And they're benefiting from this bailout. So they'll parade it out as, oh, we're saving 600 jobs, but really it's lining the pockets of these. It's helping out these guys sitting at the ultimate ownership of this company. And it's been happening again and again. There's a $135 million bailout in Nurstar for another smelter in Port Pirie and Hobart. There's one on the cards of $2.4 billion in Whyalla here in South Australia to bail out the steelworks there. And with the way that energy prices are going and the way that our manufacturing just keeps sliding overseas, it just becomes just this endless flywheel of wasted money. And, it is sad. Like, you don't want to rip the Band-Aid off and just like, okay, let it die, let it all go to China, let it all go to Indonesia or whatever. But at the same time, this seems dumb. It seems like we're just bashing our head against a brick wall and hoping for something to change. So I don't know what the answer is, but we're definitely not doing the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's the roots of this problem go deep, all the way back. I'm pretty sure into the mid '90s. There's a documentary I'd recommend people watch called "All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace" by Adam Curtis, and in that he kind of outlines how the state of the economy globally, but specifically in the US, was at all-time highs. It was, they were in a surplus, and it was all gravy, baby. And one of the things that they did at the time was shut down a lot of local manufacturing in the US, exported out to China, and then we're able to just begin this whole money printing thing. It was very nascent early days of the thought in the documentary it outlines is basically that we can get computers to just kind of sort out all of this stuff for us, and we don't need to really have to think too much about it. But it had a whole bunch of unintended consequences that we're kind of dealing with now, today. And it's certainly what we were just discussing then is certainly an echo of things like that in terms of globalization and exporting. I mean, it makes sense. China can manufacture a hell of a lot of cool stuff for incredibly cheap. But that has real world effects, and I'm not one of those isolationists that think that we should reshore everything back onto Australian soil. But certainly, if we're going to export iron ore at X price, whatever, and then a fraction, like a tiny fraction of that's going to come back in an iPhone that we pay 3 or 4 times as much as we sent like an entire ton of iron ore out, I think we're kind of getting screwed on the end of that deal, to be honest.
Yeah, the difference comes in with, yes, it's expensive to dig it up here, but if we also have industry where we do the value adds, where we're building the iPhones or building the cars or whatever, then in theory, that starts to sort itself out a little bit more. The economics make a little bit more sense. But with our current global perspective, the globalist perspective, it won't fly, because it's going to be with everything as easy as it is to flow around the world. Then yeah, this will just continue to happen, and that's why Trump is trying the tariff play to see if he can use, these sorts of forceful levers of government to rein in a bit of this globalism stuff, which does lead to manufacturing sliding way overseas. I don't think we'll see any of that here. So again, it is back to what I think it is, which is just bashing your head against a brick wall. But anyway, should we talk about Bitcoin?
I think we should pivot back to Bitcoin. That's a great idea. So Tim Draper, who is an incredibly well-revered, Wall Street trader, comes from a long line actually of venture capitalists and entrepreneurs. His grandfather, pretty sure, was a here we go. It says the son of venture pioneer William Henry Draper III and grandson of VC trailblazer William H. Draper Jr. Grew up in a dynasty of innovation. But basically, this guy knows his onions. He's got a lot of pedigree with regards to how the financial systems work. And he came out recently and basically said, quote, "There will be a moment when all the retailers say, I accept Bitcoin. And there will be a moment when retailers will say, I only accept Bitcoin." And so off the back of that, some news that came out, I think overnight, is that Square, the Jack Dorsey kind of, everyone goes and most cafes, restaurants, market store holders, things like that, will have a Square terminal, so they can get electronic funds rather than holding cash. Basically, they're really, really close. In fact, they've actually launched it to bring Bitcoin to Main Street with first integrated payments and wallet solution for local businesses. So this is really cool. Can you unpack that for us, Mike?
Yep. Yeah, so I'm just going to read a little bit verbatim. Square, the payments processor owned by Jack Dorsey's Block Inc., has launched a new feature enabling local businesses to accept Bitcoin at the point of sale and hold the digital asset in an integrated wallet, a move that could help advance Bitcoin's use as a medium of exchange. And now, if you can put aside your Bitcoin maxi hat of being a purist with self-custody and all of that sort of stuff, this is a very, very good step towards the original vision for Bitcoin as being this peer-to-peer cash where you can transact and buy regular, everyday goods and services with Bitcoin. You're not having to rely on a bank. You're not having to rely on say-so from a government. In this case, you are still relying on Square providing the infrastructure for it, but that was always going to be the case in most regards in terms of global adoption. There's going to have to be businesses and innovations that kind of help it along a bit, because your average person is not going to be able to make that mental shift of, okay, I can get a wallet and I can self-custody and then I can send Bitcoin to you. Even though it sounds simple to us that have been in it for as long as we have, your average normie they're just not going to get there. They just want to tap their whatever. And so having tools like Square that are doing these really good point of sale systems and integrating with all these different apps and rails and stuff makes it so that your normie can touch and go, is going to increase adoption. It is going to mean that you can then start using your Bitcoin to buy regular everyday goods and services. And the numbers are really good. So I believe previously we've reported on this, and I remember when I was talking about the penetration of Square terminals and Square merchants around the world, I remember a $1 million shopfront number. But in this latest article they've just released overnight, they're now saying 4 million. So there's 4 million shopfronts using Square terminals that are basically, when this change is fully rolled out, you'll be able to pay with Bitcoin at 4 million merchants. So very cool to see. Very bullish on this for just general use and adoption. Not necessarily a number go up bullish thing, but just in terms of financial freedom and choice, so that you're not having to tap your Visa or MasterCard. And the fees are also very interesting. So they've got an introductory rate. They're waiving the processing fees in 2026, which is awesome. But then even in 2027, it's just going to be a 1% transaction fee. So that still beats the crap out of your Visa and MasterCard, which, if I remember correctly, is still around like 2.6%, 2.7% in many places. And so even when they do start charging for it and it's 1%, it still beats the heck out of the dinosaurs. So This is awesome. This is really good.
Yeah, I mean, let 1,000 flowers bloom. The free market does what it does, and it's just basically hacked at those merchant fees. And so if you are a merchant, I actually mentioned this to a woman at the farmer's market the other day, just asked her, do you accept Bitcoin? She giggled and laughed, which is fair enough. Like, I didn't expect it to. But I said, well, you've got the Square terminal there, and it's entirely possible that within the next sort of year or so, I could pay you in Bitcoin, and you can just accept the dollars, and it'll be pretty easy to do that. One of the cool things is you can actually select that amount to actually save away too. So you can have like 5%, 10%, 21% of that sale you can actually retain in Bitcoin and convert the rest over into fiat dollars, which is quite a cool little feature as well. I will just mention that obviously it's difficult. You can do that without Square. So if you don't want a middleman, you can use things like BTC Pay Server. You could run a Lightning node. All of that's complete and utter pain in the ass, let's be honest. Trying to manage liquidity in channels, dealing with forced closes and all that sort of stuff. But Rockstar was announcing just recently this Buildle for merchants, which is kind of like making the ability to integrate BTC Pay Server into your business without having to go through all of the quote unquote rigmarole of setting up like a complete from scratch. It kind of just sort of speed runs that whole process. And they mentioned this actually at the Bitcoin Japan conference. Actually, no, they didn't, because that's in the future. But he was on Simply Bitcoin the other week talking about all of this. But basically, you get full control of your funds, you get privacy, easy integration with your e-commerce. It'll integrate with Shopify and WooCommerce and all that sort of stuff. So it's a competitor to something like Square, but it does require a little bit more thought and a little bit more will and work to get it spun up. This Square thing is basically just press a button, I dare say, on the terminal and bang, you can start accepting Bitcoin. There is a caveat. It's only available in the US.
Yes, it'll take a while to propagate globally. But a good metaphor to think about this sort of stuff is, again, it's the market sort of working towards filling these niches. And, yes, it is very difficult to do it yourself and run all these channels and do everything yourself. But there are products and services that are on the way that will solve that problem, make it so it is a turnkey solution, a press button solution, and it just works. And a way to think about it is just sort of like websites and for your business. You could sit there and learn HTML and CSS and do it all yourself. You could do that. Or you can go to your Squarespace or your whatever out-of-the-box website, web hosting solution and just drag and drop the things you want. And so, you just want choice. You want people to be able to make those choices. And it took a while for the internet to get to this point where you didn't need to hire a full-time web developer to build your website for you. Right now we're in this phase of Bitcoin where if you wanted to do it fully bespoke, fully yourself, you either need to put in the time to learn it yourself or hire like an engineer who can operate it all for you. But eventually these turnkey solutions will come out where you can just be like, yep, I want this amount of control. So I'm going to go with this service that's going to do this much for me. And I'm going to pay a little bit for it, but it's going to tick all the boxes that I want for my business. So it's all just, it's all come together. It's all going to plan, I think.
Yeah, everything's perfect. I told you. It reminds me a little bit. I mean, the thing is, would you actually spend Bitcoin? Because I was listening to a podcast, What Bitcoin Did, with Danny Knowles, and he had one of our esteemed Aussies, Mr. Peter Dunworth, on there the other day, and he was talking about it as, like he normally does, hyper bullish. Bitcoin's going to be like $1 quintillion at some point. Don't know when, but he just mentioned, obviously, it's pristine collateral and the notion of borrowing against your Bitcoin so that you kind of keep the hard asset there and then spend the dollars. And he mentioned that, he probably wouldn't prefer to actually spend the Bitcoin, because why would you, in theory? Like technically, when you think about it, it is the superior asset and you kind of want to keep it in your pocket until you flip it. So you get that Tears law effect where effectively the merchant no longer wants to accept that inferior money and it wants the better money. So Square is kind of enabling and speed running this Tears law, which is the opposite of Gresham's, but let's not go into that because I'll get Conza on my back if we do. But the point being is that would you spend your Bitcoin on items down at the farmer's market, even if it was nice and easy to do so, when you have the option to actually give up that worse money, if you could somehow leverage that, and get more fiat, I suppose, through various things.
Well, in my mind,
stuff.
it's real simple. If I could go to my farmer's market and pay in Bitcoin right now, with every shop I go to down at the farmer's market, and I genuinely do, 99% of my shopping is at the farmer's market. I don't go to fiat supermarkets anymore. If I could pay with Bitcoin at every single merchant, that's when I would make other changes in my life and be like, well, I want all of my salary paid in Bitcoin. I want everything coming into me is paid in Bitcoin. I don't want to touch fiat at all, because I can then pay that Bitcoin on to the farmer to buy my veggies or whatever. So it's pretty simple in my head right now, because they don't accept Bitcoin. Most of them don't. then yes, I'll still be getting some fiat in, just so it's a little bit more convenient for me. I'm not having to move things in and out depending on who I need to pay. So as more of these Square terminal services and similar come on, as adoption grows, then eventually you'll cross a threshold in your mind where it's like, well, okay, now it's more convenient to get my initial pay packet or whatever in Bitcoin and then send it to merchants. I'm not a fan of all this thing of like, borrowing against your Bitcoin and doing all these like silly games. For every person that it works out for, someone gets burned or makes a mistake or does something wrong or gets washed out. So personally, I'm not a fan of any of that stuff. I'm all about keeping it simple, spend the money you've got, and yeah, all about simplicity.
Yeah, all of that makes sense. Well, coming up to time, I just wanted to briefly mention the newsletter, which generally tends to go out at the same time as the new episode of the Australian Bitcoin podcast. Mike's the author of that. So if you've got any feedback in terms of what you want to see, what you like about it, what you don't like about it, yeah, hit us up at content@hardblock.com.au. And because we want to keep you guys informed. Obviously, it's nice and easy to listen to the podcast because you can do it while you're doing other things. But the newsletter is a really great read. It gives you a real TLDR of what's been going on in the space. And just another thing I wanted to shill lightly is a little essay, a little article we wrote, published onto the learn.hardblock.com.au website called The History of Banking in Australia, Who Controls the Money? And it gives a really nice overview of, I guess, the history of how, banking was pre-1900s, when there was a whole bunch of private banks that were issuing their own notes. And then that all just kind of went tits up. And then, the Commonwealth Bank comes on the scene. That was kind of like a stopgap at the time, effectively sold as like the People's Bank. Anyway, it's up on the website. We might chuck it in the show notes as well. And I've got some ideas into how to actually morph that into something a little bit more digestible if you're not interested in reading reasonably dry text. So you might want something else, but we're going to put in our thinking caps to try and get that across, because I think it's completely underrepresented in the Australian context. Obviously, this podcast, we draw a lot of news and information from elsewhere other than Australia, because quite frankly, not a heck of a lot goes on in Australia with regards to Bitcoin. However, that does remind me of the recent AFSL laws, which I know you're across, Mike, and I kind of wanted to hit on a happy note, but let's just hit this and then we'll hit it and quit it.
Yeah, I could talk through that. I think we should also talk real briefly on an Bitcoin Knots update as well. Just talk through that really quick, because we are in the shadow of Bitcoin Core version 30 coming out this month. So yes, we should touch on that as well. But yeah, so the AFSL stuff. So for anyone not aware, crypto exchanges like Hardblock, we have to dance to the tune of two Australian government regulators in Australia. The primary one being AUSTRAC. So they are the ones that are most concerned with KYC, AML, know your customer, anti-money laundering. So that's why we have to do all these things like find out who you are, get your ID documents, all that sort of thing. Believe me, we'd rather not do it, but we have to do it. We've got a gun to our heads. We have to do it. We have to verify people and make sure that they are not scammers, being victims of scams, or they're funding money, terrorism, all that sort of stuff. So we have AUSTRAC regulations coming through, which are pretty scary. But then we're getting a second attack, which is coming through from ASIC, so the Australian Securities Investment or Investigation Corporation, ASIC, whatever that stands for. So they are the ones who control companies dealing with financial products. So we're talking like securities and all these sorts of things. And, they are doing a good service. They are making sure that people aren't doing the wrong thing and scamming customers. And, they do provide a service to Australians. If it didn't exist, then you would get a lot more egregious business activity happening in Australia. So there is appoint to these organizations. But obviously, organizations get caught by different interests, whether it be political or corporate or global. And so ASIC is now bringing in a AFSL, an Australian Financial Services License requirement for all digital currency exchanges in Australia. So that includes Hardblock, that includes any of the other Bitcoin-only exchanges. It includes all the big boys, all the small boys. They have to get an AFSL, which is traditionally quite difficult to get. You need to come with receipts. You need to come with lawyers. You need to show basically everything about your business, show that you know what you're doing, show that you're not scamming people, doing all this sort of thing. But really, the bare bones of it is it's like a pay to play. You need to be able to pay if you want to play the game. And so that's why you can see all these big exchanges, the big international exchanges are saying, yes, we want more regulation. Yes, we're so happy that ASIC is finally saying that you need an AFSL to market your services to Australians. Now, they're super happy for it because it means that it's the ladder getting pulled up behind them. They're already in the industry. They're already in markets globally. They've already got their army of lawyers. They've got deep VC pools of money that they can throw at getting AFSLs and getting all these other regulatory things in line. And the ladder's getting pulled up behind them so that it's incredibly difficult for new businesses and for small businesses to grow and expand because they have these hurdles to get over. This AFSL hurdle is the obvious one. And so they're happy. The big boys are super happy. The little guys are either going to get squeezed out and just disappear because they can't get an AFSL, and new businesses can't come in and threaten the position of these big players because of the looming threat of an AFSL. So that's in consultation now. That consultation closes in 11 days. And I expect we'll see this come in next year, that an AFSL requirement will be there for anyone that wants to offer these sorts of crypto services. Previously, it was only required for things like derivatives and securities, this sort of thing. Yield products required an AFSL, but now it's just you want to buy Bitcoin, you want to sell Bitcoin, you need an AFSL. So it's a bit scary. Really, the outcome is it's going to stifle small Australian businesses. It's going to favor these bigger international players, big American companies. It's going to stifle your small local Aussie players. So it's not good. It's not going to have it's not going to have their publicized intended effect of all these sorts of things. The actual effect is it's just going to be stifling small business in Australia. So same tune as always, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a tale as old as time, and ultimately, as you rightly pointed out, it affects the ones that are trying to do the right thing, being Bitcoin only, really looking after our customers. I mean, we hand call basically. I say hand call, but we call and talk to all new customers and onboard them, and make sure that they know their onions, get them up to speed if they've got any questions. And effectively do all of that, take that time. That increases our costs, but we end up getting a better result because we can mitigate fraud a heck of a lot easier, but also we get to know our customers, and it's almost like a nice sort of small-ish business that, we're just trying to do the right thing because we're hardcore Bitcoin maxis. We want more and more people to onboard into Bitcoin, and you could go through one of the bigger guys, the ones that trade all of the shit coins and distract you with all of that trash and garbage, and obviously make an enormous amounts of revenue off the back of that. And you
won't even speak with them. They'll do all of that as this faceless mega corporation, and you won't ever speak to a real person. The number of times where I speak to a customer and they've previously used like a Coinbase or whatever these international exchanges are, and they'll say, "Oh, I didn't expect a real flesh and blood Australian to call me and talk to me about Bitcoin." They're just used to dealing with these faceless corporations, and even if they did speak with someone at Coinbase or whatever, they'd probably be dealing with an offshore, Indian call center or Filipino call center who will probably leak their information, as what happened to one of those big players recently. That's the future of these big exchanges. It's only the little guys, the bespoke exchanges that offer you a real, genuine service. You can talk to a flesh and blood Australian, and our regulators are killing that. It's utterly insane when you think about it. But that is what our bureaucratic class is doing in Australia, and it's not just in Bitcoin; it's everything. And
it's everything, and they're all getting paid quite handsomely in order to do so as well, which is the most egregious, I guess, element to all of this. And yeah, look, honestly, it baffles and boggles my mind almost every day. And I try not to think about it too much because it just is, you know. And the thing is, it's kind of like another spot fire that we have to kind of turn our attention to and try and at least direct some time and energy towards in order to potentially put it out or mitigate it somehow. And again, like we're quite closely aligned with ABIB, Australian Bitcoin industry body, and they do a great job there to advocate for the Australian Bitcoin only community or industry, the space. And again, it's just like another spot fire that we're constantly having to put out. And we've only got 24 hours in the day, 8 of which you're probably sleeping, ideally. And the notion is we've got like so many other things. It's just like anything else. There's a lot going on, and it's just kind of gross that you've got, as we talked about before, work from home. You're on $150,000 a year. You're a net tax consumer. You're producing absolutely zero in terms of value for your community, for even scaling it as far as the nation. And I don't know, man. It's just, we can whinge about it, but we can just kind of crack on, stick our head down, and
well, it's not even that they're not producing anything. It's that they're actually actively destroying their local community and people that work and run businesses in their local community. It's all
spreading
bad all the way down. And I think that, if you're wondering, what can you do? If you interact with a government person that fits the bill of this thing that we're talking about, start to get a bit animated, talk to them about it, explain, like, I'm unhappy with what you do, point the finger. Like, I'm at that point where it's like, if I meet a government employee that fits the bill of this like pure parasitic class, I'm going to let them know about it. I'm going to tell them that I'm unhappy with what they do and try and instill a bit of guilt in them. It's time to get, I'm happy to get a bit angry and animated and in people's faces.
Grassroots guilt.
Got to do it.
Yeah, I mean, they got to know at the end of the day. The problem with all of this is it's all proxies and pawns. There's so many layers and layers and layers of like bureaucratic managerial class and obfuscation. One of the hopes that I have in particular in and around something like AI as it advances and these LLMs become incredibly more competent, you can get direct, dedicated agents to do various tasks, is that it actually guts all of that. And I don't care about the outcry. Like, I literally do not care when people whinge that they're not getting a pay rise that they deserve or whatever else. Like, I haven't had a pay rise in God knows how long. And most of that is because, I've changed jobs and I've done a few little bits and bobs, but also the industry and the career that I've developed over the last 20 odd years, it doesn't afford that because it's literally aligned with the Jeff Booth thesis of technology is deflationary, and you just got to deal with it. There's no bailout. There's no bailout for the media industry. It's we're not getting 300,000 per person for the next 3 years,
unless you work for the ABC.
You see, centralization. Anyway. Speaking of centralization, let's pivot real quick to the Knots v Core debate, get a little bit of an update on what's happening there, because we are in the month. It's coming up to D-Day with version 30 coming out, and there was a core developer on what Bitcoin did recently that you watched, Mike, and I don't know, you've got the inside line on that.
Yeah, so just for a little bit of background for anyone living under a rock, there's a controversial change coming up in the latest release of Bitcoin Core version 30, which is due to release this month, which basically changes a whole bunch of things, but the main thing is a removal of the op return data carrier limit, which the theory is that it can open the door to more spam on chain. Arguments against that say that, well, spammers can spam it regardless of whether there's this data carrier limit exists or not. The hope is that by removing this cap, the spam, for anyone not sure what spam is arbitrary data held on chain, your monkey JPEGs, your whatever. In theory, if people start using this, then it's going to be using less toxic to the Bitcoin network options, these workarounds that people are using. Some people say it's futile. Some people say it's not. Some people say filters work. Some people say they don't. And there's a fork of Bitcoin Core called Bitcoin Knots that is picking up steam. It's run by one of the core developers called Luke Dash Jr. Very controversial whether you should use it or not. Do your research before you do decide to make that choice, because it does come with a lot of caveats around you're trusting this one developer with not very many people having eyes on the code. There's also questions about, will you not have an accurate fee estimation based on the transactions that are hitting a knots node? So there's definitely trade-offs. So do your research before you make the switch. But that being said, a lot of people are making the switch. We're at 21% of reachable nodes are now running Bitcoin knots, which is pretty cool. It is questionable whether it actually matters, because if miners are not using it, then economic nodes are not using knots, then does it really matter? So there's a lot of confusing debate and discussion happening. And yeah, as you said, there's a and before I move too far away, just a public service announcement. With the release of Bitcoin Core version 30, the way the Bitcoin Core works is they will do maintenance for the previous 2 versions of Bitcoin Core. So if you're currently running a node and you're running Bitcoin Core and you're running version 27 or older, then you will want to at least update to version 28 or 29. You don't have to jump to version 30 if you don't want to, but with the release of version 30 does mean that Core will start to disclose vulnerabilities of previous releases, so version 27. So if you are running version 27, you will want to upgrade to at least version 28 in the run-up to this release. So just a quick public service announcement. Antoine Poinsot, I don't know how to pronounce it, French name. He's a core developer. He was on What Bitcoin Did, and they basically just had a discussion about this whole thing. It is quite interesting. If you are curious to get a bit more of the insider info about this debate, it was an interesting episode. So if you want to listen to that one, but he talks about things. I've just made some notes here. Claims that Core is not compromised or corrupt. There's a lot of people that are, the anti-spam movement is saying that, Core's a bit corrupt. It's been co-opted by pro-spam or pro-whatever interests, trying to push certain changes to the software. The developer says, no, that's not the case. Again, on my end, we're trusting this guy to say that. How can we verify that? The only way to really verify that is to delve into the code yourself, which you can. But again, the average person's not really going to do that. So we do need to be able to trust certain people to say what's really happening. Claims that Core is not going woke, even though detractors are saying that it is. Luke Dash Jr. is quite an interesting one. He had some things to say about Luke. And another element that's arisen in this debate is the issue of CSAM, child sexual exploitation material, that is being inserted into the Bitcoin blockchain through this spam mechanism. And in my mind, that is a legitimate issue. That is a huge issue. And now you can get into these debates on how we can deal with that. Luke Dash Jr. has got some pretty radical ideas on how to deal with that. He's even considering a hard fork, which gives the ability for a certain set of developers or people to be able to go in and remove this data, which is quite a extreme thing if you think about it. That's giving people golden keys to go in and change things in the blockchain. Quite a radical move, but it is to remove CSAM material that is otherwise running on your Bitcoin node. So it is a good thing, but it comes with a lot of issues. So that's an interesting angle to the debate that's been thrown in last minute. So yeah. I mean, we could go on. We're already a bit over time. But anyway, if you're interested, go listen to that episode, see what the developer's saying, and just formulate your own opinion. Don't listen to me.
It would just be a lot cooler if people were a little bit more chill, and maybe just don't try so hard. You know, it's easier to not put C-spam on the blockchain than it is to just like do it. You know what I'm saying? Like it takes more time. Like I don't know, just relax.
I will say,
go do something else with your life. Fuck.
Yeah, I will say a couple more things, which is just like, you know, we're talking about people doing this, but instead my thing is always go back to the root symptoms and the root issues in society. You know, what is it that is causing people to do this sort of thing in the first place? What is going on in their lives or the societies that are causing them to exploit children and then share it to other psychopaths around the world? You know, these are the questions that we need to be holding our politicians and our societies to account for. Why are people like this? Why are we not researching into this? What causes someone to be a psychopathic abuser, and how do we ostracize them from our societies in the first place? Not only how do we deal with the symptoms, let's deal with the cause. So there needs to be a lot more of that sort of debate happening, which is not a Bitcoin thing. That's a societal thing. Bitcoin will help because it's fixing the money, fixing the world, and all that philosophy, which does make a lot of sense to me. But yes, we need to be drilling down into what elements of society are causing these symptoms to appear. And just one more thing I'll say about a perspective on this whole issue with Bitcoin. Like my perspective as a user, as a customer of Bitcoin, I want Bitcoin to be used for economic transactions. I do not give a shit about arbitrary data, about NFTs, about images in Bitcoin, about any sort of this sort of crap. And I would be willing to make compromises, to make changes, to pay more, to whatever it is, to remove that from the network. Now, I get that it's very difficult. There's always going to be these workarounds when you are dealing with just numbers in a computer. You are going to have these arbitrary fields that can be abused and exploited. But at its core, it shouldn't have that. Yes, someone can build some kind of additional software thing that sits on top, and this is my vehicle for sending monkey JPEGs or child porn on Bitcoin, but it's a separate service. It should not be possible in the core service. And Bitcoin Core, or whoever, should be working towards removing that from the core service. It's simple as. It's an economic system. It's not a child porn distribution system. So developers should be working towards that goal. End of story. End of story. And if you flip it on the other side, this is a bit more of a conspiratorial side. If I'm a psychopath and I run a business that relies on monkey JPEGs, child porn, whatever data, ordinals, runes, NFTs, if my business and my livelihood relies on that being on Bitcoin, then I'm going to fight and I'm going to talk to developers. I'm going to fund them. I'm going to lobby them. I'm going to try and give them money so that this sort of stuff is kept in Bitcoin and made easier. And so we need to just be saying no to that. Developers need to be saying no to that. Yes, there is a free speech argument here. Yes, I fully agree with that. But this is an economic system. It's not necessarily a speech system. And yes, I get there is nuance, but we need to be getting back to basics here.
No, Bitcoin.
Sorry, I went on a bit of a rant there.
No, go hard, man. That's fine. That's fine. I like a little bit of Mike Jones. It's no sweat at all. I look, it's simple. Yeah, Bitcoin is money. Keep it that way. It's not a global repository for your pictures. I don't care what really they are. I don't care if they're dick butts or CSAM or anything else. Like, it's money, and it's the greatest money we've ever made. That we've ever discovered, that's ever been engineered, whichever way you want to think about it. Leave it as money, because otherwise, good grief, the evil forces. There's enough evil in this planet, circling around this world without having it to taint and destroy. And I guess incentives are incredibly powerful, but I mean, Jesus Christ. Destroy all evil. Like, I just have zero time for it. If you're a bad actor, you're a bad actor, and And to that extent, you know, we can lobby the politicians and stuff all we want. We can go on Q&A and ask a pointed question if you can get past all of the gatekeepers and producers and stuff like that. But, you know, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, it's gross. I didn't want to end the pod on a necessarily downbeat, although, you know, there are certain songs that do that, and that's quite cool. But there is a really cool chart that came out that got dropped by Bitcoin Infinity earlier in the week. He has dropped quite a few of these over the last couple of years. We've used it in reference to one of our charts in terms of house prices. And the latest update, I think we've got 5 Bitcoin that it cost to afford the median house price in Australia. Well, that's just dropped below 5 Bitcoin as of close September, the monthly close on September. So it's 4.95. So it's not much of a drop, but it's directionally correct. And so over that sort of 10-year period, or 11-year period. So Hardblock was established in 2014, and back then it would cost you 3,374 Bitcoin to afford the average median house price in Australia. Today, as of the September close, it's 4.95. So if you are actually legitimately wanting to buy some land, a house for your family or just for yourself or whatever, I think most of us by now as Bitcoiners know that a house is not a store of value. It's a place to build a home and to raise a family in and do all of those net productive things. If you want to do that, your only hope in hell is to buy Bitcoin and to start saving in it. You can't buy a whole Bitcoin. Who cares? Buy $10 a week. We've got the DCA calculator up online, which I'll link in the show notes. You can figure out, you know, how much you need to drop. Maybe you can stop drinking your coffee at the local cafe or whatever it is. If it's $5 a day or if it's $5 a week, it doesn't matter. But if you want a hope in hell of actually affording a roof over your head and actually living the life that you were promised, well, you need to start stacking as much Bitcoin as you possibly can. And ideally, you do that through hardblock.com.au. So nice little light shill at the end. We've got tons of resources for you to learn more about Bitcoin. So we've got the learn.hardblock.com.au page. We've got our Zero to Hero email chain. We've got our Hardblock newsletter, which comes off the back of the Australian Bitcoin podcast. And of course, if you're a meetup organizer or you're just curious and you want to get your hands on an easy Bitcoin book, whether that's in PDF form or in the printable version, and we're actually in the process of updating this. We've got a couple of little tweaks to make. Give us a shout out, send us a DM on Twitter or tweet at us, whatever it is. Get in touch, content@hardblock.com.au, and we can send you a few of those books to use and educate yourself with, or also, you know, give to family and friends. Possibly, dare I say it, being in October, over Christmas. So, you know, we've got all of the resources that you need, and we're going to drop these pretty soon as well. These are really cool. So we've got the get, you know, $10 free Bitcoin. We're calling them hard cards, and you can see on there that's a scratch panel. So behind that is a QR code, which links you to a special sign-up page, gets you $10 worth of free Bitcoin on sign-up. Currently, these are only available in physical iterations, so you kind of have to come and see one of us, and God knows how you're actually going to do that. But we'll host events and all sorts of stuff as we move into Q4 2026. And yeah, I mean, look, do you know what? You might even see a few dropped around guerrilla style. We don't want to be littering, but certainly if you drop into a cafe in and around Adelaide and elsewhere, you might come across one.
Go to your local Bitcoin meetup.
Go to your local Bitcoin meetup. Yeah, there's plenty around, and we've been sending as many books as we can out to those guys. Anyone that I haven't got to as well, stand by as we update the new edition of the book. We'll get some more hard copies out to you guys. I know that they've been very effective. Yeah, so I think the main takeaway is that, you know, we are directionally correct. We're hitting all-time highs. The dollar, certainly the US dollar, is down bad. The Australian dollar is down even badder, if I can use that grammar. And yeah, man, like the resources are out there. Learn Bitcoin, listen to Bitcoin podcasts, preferably 40 hours per week would be the ideal. You got to want it. You got to do the work. So yeah, man, thanks, Mike, for joining us. Episode 97. This is the Australian Bitcoin podcast. Appreciate everybody for tuning in and spending some time and energy listening to us give you the update of the last fortnight. We'll be back in about a fortnight's time. Keep an eye on the newsletter. And yeah, cheers. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, TJ. Thanks, everyone. Take it easy.